On today's show, we're previewing the title unification bout at UFC 242, where the defending UFC lightweight champion Khabib the Eagle Nurmagomedov battles the interim champ Dustin the Diamond Poirier. Last October, Khabib produced a masterclass to overcome the notorious Conor McGregor on a record-breaking night in Vegas.
There's the tap! Still undisputed! Khabib Nurmagomedov!
Considered one of the greatest grapplers in MMA, Khabib has been dominant, amassing an incredible resume of 27 wins with 0 defeats, and returns to the Octagon in no mood to tarnish his perfect record. In Poirier, however, the Russian faces a man who has paid in full throughout his career in the Octagon. A prolific striker and knockout specialist, Dustin Poirier's willingness to go toe-to-toe with any opponent has made him one of the most exciting fighters in the business.
Dustin Poirier by knockout!
Will the diamond shine bright, or will the eagle continue to soar? Hello and welcome to UFC Inside the Octagon, the show that brings you the biggest breakdowns for the biggest fights. I'm John Gooden, alongside former title challenger turned analyst Dan Hardy. And Dan, what do you think about Abu Dhabi as a spectacle for this fight?
I think it's great. I mean, a purpose-built arena. Everyone will flock to the place to be a part of this experience. Khabib's carrying this on his shoulders. This is a big event for him, and I'm sure that he feels like the UFC are kind of paying him back for putting it in a territory where he's got really good fan support, as opposed to always having to fly to the US to fight someone that's more of a hometown favourite there. We're now celebrating Khabib as the champion that he is.
How big is this fight with Dustin?
It's massive, especially because they're coming in from different sides. You've got Khabib, who's coming in undefeated, rolled through everybody that he's faced so far. Poirier on the other side has been a battler from the very beginning. WEC days. He's gone the hard way. He's fought all the toughest fights. He's had setbacks. He's moved weight classes. It's a bit of a fairy tale story for Poirier, especially to come up against someone like Khabib, who is so dominant.
Yeah, it was quite an emotional time, actually, seeing him capture the interim championship belt. Well, let's go to the facts and the stats and see what they look like with their respective gold. A little new design on the shoulder of Dustin, the older style here for Khabib. I mean, there's a reach difference there. Are we reading into that much?
Well, I mean, the thing is, Khabib throws it. He throws his right hand. He pitches that right over the top. So the full extent of that reach is going to be used. But when it comes to Poirier, he likes to stand very, very close. And he throws big, powerful hooks, which means that extra 2-inch reach is not going to make much of a difference to him, I wouldn't think.
Right.
Unless, he's got a good jab and he could use that jab well, but this is going to be a close-range fight.
I just totally skipped that, didn't I, for a moment?
Yeah.
I think we sometimes just forget how ridiculously impressive that is. In mixed martial arts,
yes, it is.
A perfect record. 27 wins.
Yeah, it's very impressive. And, and to have a championship belt on his shoulder as well. I mean, you can get to 27-0 in mixed martial arts if you're fighting the right kind of people.
When you say the right
kind of people, perhaps. But, I mean, Khabib has worked his way to the top, still staying undefeated, and has come through some tough tests. We've seen him hurt once. We've seen him struggle through 5 rounds against Al Quinta. And, he's managed to adapt, he's managed to change, and we're still seeing him evolve from one fight to another. Yeah.
I'm going to point out these 2 stats here, because they talk about the strike differential and how good both of these fighters are at that. But one thing that we've added in is the 368 significant ground strikes, 3rd most in UFC history. So ground fighter, record-breaking, and then 91.6 at distance or clinch. So these guys do their work pretty differently.
Yeah, they do. And one thing I will say about this is, the clinch striking, a lot of that is down to the fact that Poirier is trying to punch his way out into range as well. He wants to be at range. When we talk about ranges, though, they're very different ranges. This is not a McGregor range that he likes to stand at, which is really far out. His range is still quite close to his opponent, but he just likes to maintain that space between the boxing and the clinch range. He'll punch into and out of the clinch, but ultimately he wants that space there.
OK, look, I'm really excited about this one. We have looked at both of these guys before, but it's so different when you put 2 different styles against one another. So let's get into it then. Let's start with the champion. Now, we know all about his wrestling. He's famous for it. But I think what's been great to see is the evolution of his striking game, particularly under the guidance of AKA. And for me, we saw it, I've certainly seen it noticeably since the Barboza fights.
Yeah, and I think that, You know, a part of the reason why his striking's coming on so quickly is because he's got that wrestling base to fall upon. You know, if he goes crashing forward and his strike misses, somebody tries to take him down, you're playing into his game.
Yeah.
And we saw this against Barbosa, and this was a very calculated approach. Closing Barbosa down, not allowing him the space to get his dangerous kicking game off. I mean, Khabib was pretty much standing on his front foot the whole time, walking his way into punching range, and you could see how that pressure was starting to wear on Barbosa, who constantly was trying to find space in the octagon to throw his kicks. Allow Khabib just to start throwing his hands, gains confidence as well in his striking with these kind of fights. And with McGregor as well, I think this surprised a lot of people. You know, when you've got that wrestling background, you can invest in that. You can tie people up for a couple of rounds and wear them out and then start to pick up your striking there. Like McGregor there, you can see pauses for 1 second because he's expecting to be able to counter with that left hand. But he's also thinking about the fact that Khabib might level change. That conflict of decision in his mind is what left him open for that right hand. It was, you know, perfectly timed. And then you've got Al Iaquinta, who was hesitant to step forward, even though he's a good boxer. And he's, you know, he'll quite happily take punches and trade punches with anybody. Heavy hands, good chin. But he was constantly concerned about the takedown coming from Khabib, so he never got his striking started. There were points in this fight where I thought Al Iaquinta could have put his foot on the gas, but the hesitation, you've got to think, is because he just didn't want to end up smashed up against the fence again. You know, dealing with Khabib in that range is awful, and that doubt that it puts in your mind forces you to deal with his striking when you wouldn't want to. Yeah. And that allows Khabib to, you know, his confidence is on the rise, and then you can see his hands are down by his side, his hands are loose, he's snapping that lead jab out, and he's playing a bit of Diaz there. He's pointing, he's talking at you as well. You can see he's relaxed. When a fighter's relaxed, they move faster, their hands move faster, and it's a lot less easy to time them. If you're a counter-puncher like Al Iaquinta, he's not the fastest of guys. But Dustin Poirier, on the other hand, I feel like he's got slightly faster hand speed, so he might be able to make the most of that.
Well, let's flip it then to Dustin and assume that we're going to see Nurmagomedov coming forward with that pressure from early on. What does the Diamond do to slow that down? What tools have you picked out?
Well, I mean, he's got good footwork. There's no doubt about that. He's got good footwork. He moves very well. He also switches from one stance to another, which allows him to, if he's pressuring, to step through and maintain the pressure. If he's being pressured, it allows him to step back into different stances with his counter punches. He's got heavy hands, and I think Khabib will know that, and I think he'll give him that respect in the first round. I also think that if there are any striking exchanges, Khabib will feel that power and will also start to work around that, which will give Poirier a bit of space. I also think there's a real value in working that lead leg. Chopping into the lead leg, slowing Khabib's forward momentum down, and it's something that Poirier tends to start his fights with as well. A couple of good low kicks, just to remind you that if you step forward too hard, he's going to punish you for it. And because Khabib's a front foot fighter, everything he does comes off that front foot. He lands heavy on the front foot when he punches, he level changes onto that front leg. If you can start wearing at that, the low calf, the inside-outside leg, it sets up all kinds of things, because then you become a little laboursome on that foot. You start to step heavier on it, which means it's more vulnerable for the kicks. You know, a fighter like Dustin Poirier, who knows how to start taking that base away, knows how to expose you when you are off balance. So if he hits you with an inside low kick and your leg flares out to the side, then you're open for his hands. Same thing with Eddie Alvarez. Working that outside calf kick left Eddie Alvarez available for the hand strikes. I just feel like, although obviously there's a risk in throwing kicks against Khabib, there's a risk in getting taken down against Khabib when you stand in your corner before the fight started. He's that good of a wrestler. So sometimes you have to kind of go, well, if I'm going to be defending a takedown, I might as well give him something to think about at the same time. And I would say that the way that Poirier boxes is going to be more susceptible to takedowns throwing hands than he would with his legs. On
to Khabib then. Wrestling.
Yeah.
His bread and butter. He's almost out there on his own with what he can do. And actually, I think we looked at a stat where we saw that for his last 8 fights, he's taken every one of those opponents down in the first round. Prolific. Probably doesn't do it justice. And then he does a lot of good work off the back of his wrestling as well.
He does. And I think because people know that wrestling offensive is there, it allows him to get closer to them than they want to, because there's a panic. Instead of them throwing, they back up. So when they back up, they find themselves against the fence. When they find themselves against the fence, that's when you're in that grind cycle that we spoke about with DC. Khabib is very much of the same mentality. He'll work hard for that takedown. I mean, this was a hard-fought takedown against McGregor. Adaptable, though. I love that little sweep that he uses on the foot. But that forward pressure that he has all the time, you know, shooting and failing, he's not too bothered about. It's more about getting his opponent to work, forcing them back, making them feel like they're making decisions based off what he's doing and not the other way around. And one thing I will say about this low single as well, it's something that he started to use more in his recent fights than he did earlier in his career. Earlier in his career, he was happy to push people up against the fence, to level change to the hip. What I'm seeing now is that shot to that lead leg, whether it's southpaw or orthodox, he clamps onto the foot and then he lifts them and elevates them and runs them to the floor. I'm only speculating, but the reason I feel like he's doing that is because he's less vulnerable to uppercuts and knees, which is something he has to think about with Poirier. Poirier's great at coming forward and squaring up and throwing hooks. But I would say 1 in every sort of 10 or 12 shots from Poirier comes right up that centre channel. And if you're Khabib, if you're level changing right close to Poirier, you're level changing onto that uppercut. If you're level changing slightly further out, there's the danger of the knee. So I think he's going through those ranges before he even gets close to his opponent and getting onto a foot.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, once he's got a foot, he's like glue. He's so sticky.
Isn't it ridiculous? Because an ankle pick and that low single is not easy to control.
It's not.
But the way that he's he's able to like clamp on so tight.
Yes,
it is
amazing. And he does the same when he's binding the legs as well, which is something I want to discuss in a little while. But like, what most people do when they're binding the legs, they focus on controlling the legs at the knees. What you'll notice Khabib does, he controls the legs at the ankles.
Yeah.
It seems to be something that he's realised how immobilising it is for a fighter. I mean, we see it sometimes when you can control one ankle when somebody's on the floor. Like, Khabib's doing that in the process of a takedown. He's hitting that single. Most people are fast enough to turn out of it, but then he's locked onto that ankle. And then you're just dragging Khabib around the octagon with you until you end up on your back.
Yeah, fascinating stuff, Dan. We've got to go to a break now, so we'll be back with some more analysis on the other side. Welcome back to UFC Inside the Octagon, where we're talking about the title unification clash between the lightweight champion Khabib Nurmagomedov and Dustin "The Diamond" Poirier, currently wearing the interim championship belt. Dan, you alluded to something quite interesting before the break, the centre channel for Dustin Poirier. We've spoken about the aggressive nature of the wrestling of Khabib and more, but talk about this central channel for Dustin Poirier. I'm fascinated.
OK, well, you've got to assume that when Khabib's moving into range, he's going to be level changing in front of his opponent. You know, unless he gets his hands on them in the clinch, he's going to have to deal with that central channel every time. It's a danger zone that he's got to negate if he tries to get close to his opponent from distance. As I was saying about Poirier, he's very calculated with his striking. Sometimes he looks very reckless, he looks very aggressive. And, like, you'll see that he comes crashing forward. I mean, this work against Eddie Alvarez was much better, just kind of touching and moving around him. I would say this is a useful tactic to use against Khabib. Oftentimes, we see him get drawn in. He's got good management of range. He doesn't mind keeping his hands down and drop his way out of range or rolls under punches very nicely. But ultimately, it's his aggression and his placement of his punches that really does the job. You know, a beautiful roll underneath against Eddie there. But, like, this constant forward pressure when he's got someone on the back foot is something that I don't think we've seen Khabib deal with in the past. Against Iaquinta, it was 1 punch, 2 punches, and Khabib was out of the way and he was OK. You don't get 1 or 2 punches from Poirier. You get 10, 15, 20. And what I was saying before is he throws hooks, and then every sort of 10th punch comes right up the middle. And because most people are defending, you know, that crazy monkey Tito Ortiz style, I would say Khabib's defence as well as his striking, it's quite elementary, fundamentally quite basic. There's nothing too complicated about it. And I think when it comes to striking defence, we're going to see a lot of this kind of stuff that Grisby was doing, just kind of covering the sides of your head because most of the punches are coming around the sides. So it's that one that sneaks up the centre that you don't see coming. That kind of cut changes fights. It was a glancing knee on Max Holloway. It cut him wide open. You can see the mesh right at the end of the fight there. Like, you've got to think, if that happens in the first or second round, there are 2 impacts. One is that it could potentially be a fight-ending cut. It could be bleeding into the eyes. 2, you've got an unbeaten fighter that's probably never seen their own blood in a fight before. You've got to think that psychological impact of, oh, hang on, this is the first time I'm bleeding.
Yeah.
Like, now how does that... Exactly, and how does that change his mentality going forward? Yeah. Does he then start being more aggressive and take more risks? Does he get angry and want to start trading punches with Poirier because he's spilled his own blood? You know, there are lots of different things that happen when a fighter sees their own blood. You know, Bruce Lee used to taste it and get kind of crazy. I mean, if we see Khabib do that, we know he's going to be a dangerous individual, because a motivated Khabib is a dangerous Khabib. Yeah. But a glancing knee that opens up a cut is a fight changer.
Yeah. Just want to talk about the hooks, because I feel like if Poirier engages in multiple hooks, that's too many seconds for Khabib to get in underneath. So do you feel like if he's going to throw those hooks, he's got to stay emotionally calm, maybe just 2 hooks before he comes to an uppercut?
Yeah, quite possibly. The one thing I will say, though, in Poirier's defence is that, like, he's got good feet. His feet move well. And if he's the one that's being the aggressor, if he's got Khabib backed up against the fence, Khabib's shooting on Poirier's terms. He's not shooting on his own terms. Khabib is so dangerous when he's the one that's dictating the pace of the fight and the range in the octagon. When he's level changing on his terms, he'll shoot and reshoot and reshoot, and he'll get you eventually. If you back him up against the fence and you put him under pressure, Poirier's going to see that level change so much easier. Ultimately, I just feel like because he stands quite square up against the fence when he is putting people under pressure, I feel like Khabib hitting those square hips under panic when he's under fire, I think it gives Poirier a better chance of defending those takedowns.
I'm excited to see it because we are going to see it. But something that you were talking about just then was Poirier's ability to get out of the takedown, his takedown defence. What have you seen, what have you picked out for us to take a look at that has shown he can handle this pressure, the wrestling, and then the answers to that as well? Well,
a couple of things I've already mentioned. Toughness is going to be one of them. Durability. He's got toughness and durability. They're a given for Poirier's fights. So when he gets into the octagon with those things, he knows that he's got that in the back pocket. That gives him peace of mind. That if he does get taken down and beaten up for 2 rounds, that doesn't mean that's the fight over. You know, 3 more rounds to work, scrambling, making Khabib work, having a good understanding of wrestling basics as well. Underhooks and overhooks are going to be a big key for this one. Look at this takedown against Brandao here. A beautiful whizzer there, drives Brandao to the fence, and then he gets back to his feet. There's never an acceptance of being taken down. Even here, when the takedown gets finished, he's just got to watch that hand. That's where Khabib's going to be looking for that bind, that wrist bind. That's one thing he has to be careful of. But getting back to the fence and keeping his back against the fence as he gets up is going to be a key, because Khabib will be trying to take his back as he's getting up. And then straight back up to punches. I mean, there's no, like, you're standing square, pressure's on immediately. If you're a fighter that's just scored a takedown and the fighter gets back up, you've got that discouragement, you've got that cardiac impact as well. Now you're standing in front of a guy that's throwing rocks at you. Same thing with Ferreira. This was a beautiful scramble. Nice front headlock here, adapts to the trip roll straight through, and then digs an underhook immediately, so he's protecting his back again. Keys against Khabib are going to be very important, protecting the back, overhooks and underhooks. And again, you know, pressuring people up against the fence, forcing them to shoot on your terms, allows Poirier to start working his neck attacks. I'm not saying he's gonna submit Khabib, but if Khabib's in on a single leg and he starts to feel his airwaves getting closed off, he's gonna let go of that leg to fight for his neck, which then puts you back in this position. And if you're shooting under panic, you're gonna shoot into this front headlock position. Anytime where Poirier's got around the head, he's got a chin strap, he's got that grip under the armpit, that's when he starts to set up his Darce chokes. And again, Khabib's going to have great wrestling, he's going to have great Darce defence, but if you take a couple of shots and you're a bit rocked, a bit foggy, and you shoot a takedown, you can end up in a guillotine before you even realise what's happened. So I think there are options for Poirier to be offensive in his defence, and I think that the Darce choke is something to be bearing in mind.
The posting that you were talking about that Poirier was shown there, from that clip, does he naturally do it quite far away from his body, which you think is going to serve him well? Because Khabib's got to either reach around the back and hook that in. It looked to me like there was pretty decent space, so his natural programming is that he posts quite far away.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, I'm not sure whether it's because it's a calculated thing or just because he's in a hurry to get to the fence.
Yeah, right.
You know, I think he might just be posting to try and get there quick as he can.
Not a bad idea against
Not at all. As long as he's staying square to Khabib, he can post out. He can move back and post out and stay square, as long as his back's staying square to the fence. It's when he starts posting and turning is when it starts to become an issue. Because when, like, if this is the fence here, if I've posted there and I'm turning, Khabib coming around the back to control that wrist, that's the Dagestani handcuff. That's the thing that, I mean, let's watch this play.
The leg irons and the handcuffs.
That's it. We're seeing it so much. It's kind of like the calf kick. It's something that's come into the sport fairly recently and is having a lot of success. People have used it in the past, of course, but it seems to be much more of a game plan now. I mean, look how he binds the legs. That's first of all. What great control. Sits on the knees, but look here, now he's controlling the ankles here. The knee line's clear. He's not interested in the knees. He's controlling the ankles. He can get a much tighter lock on that. And here you can see against Michael Johnson, this is the grind cycle. He's got the wrist control there. He's striking, and so Johnson's covering. As soon as there's an opportunity for Johnson to get that wrist free, he does, and then Khabib goes straight back to controlling it. Fold you down, hold you against the fence, and beat you up. So that risk control is going to be something that Poirier's got to watch out for. And ultimately, he's going to wear you down until you offer him something, because no one can take a beating like that for 25 minutes. Like, you have to have some good rounds in that, you know? The way that Khabib fights, it will wear down and break anybody. It will force you to make bad decisions. We saw it in the Conor fight first and foremost. It was the best example. Conor, great takedown defense in this fight. I thought his wrestling looked really good, just not good enough. And when you've got Khabib in the top position like this compressive style that he uses, immediately exposed his back in this round and was able to finish it with a face crank. I mean, that's got to be tight. That's got to be tight. For all of the ego and bravado that went into that fight, for Conor to tap to a face bar must have been incredibly painful. And as soon as the fight's over, you kind of see him going like, to make sure he's going to be able to chew tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a tight squeeze.
Yeah.
And that's a tight squeeze on your whole body as well. It's not just the face, it's the legs, it's the clamping, it's the... Everything about his game is compressive. It must be exhausting to have him on top of you.
Well, on the other side, I've noticed that Poirier has very much focused this camp on wrestling. What do you think about that, though? Really, really focusing on his opponent's strengths, perhaps more so than his. And it sounds like it's been absolute hell for him for the last 10 weeks.
Yeah, but I would say that that's more of a confidence builder than anything. Because I would say that if you took Dustin Poirier from 2 or 3 years ago, the striking skills that he has, and you didn't change anything about them, you can give him those striking skills in this fight and he still has the ingredients to win. He still has the ability to beat Khabib with the striking skills he's had over the last few years. So what working at his wrestling will do in his takedown defense, that will give him the confidence to apply that striking. It's more of a psychological thing than anything. If I've been through that grind, like when I fought GSP, I spent over a week, the week before, with Matt Serra, just grinding, working through submission escapes. So when I got into the fight, I knew I did that work. I knew I had that in the bag. And I mean, Poirier won't make the same mistakes that I did. He'll throw his hands because he knows he's got that good takedown defense and good scrambling ability. And again, because I feel like he knows he's going to have to work through some hard rounds before he gets anything off. I think the research is there. If he looks at the Iaquinta fight, I think he'll feel confident that, you know, had he been there in the 3rd and 4th round against Khabib, he would have been able to put a different fight together. And I think that is only reinforced by him working his wrestling takedown defense hard in this training camp.
Yeah. Well, it's a fascinating match, isn't it? And what a spectacle it's going to be in Abu Dhabi as well. You're going to be there, right?
I'm going to be there, of course.
I'm not. Sadly, I'll be watching it on the television.
Send you a photo, John.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. OK, well, what do you think about today's show? Your thoughts? Keep the conversation going. Use the hashtag #InsideTheOctagon. Tweet at UFC Europe. This is a fascinating fight for the gold honours as well. Hope you enjoy it. We'll see you next time for the big pay-per-view.